Hello and welcome to Nightmare Masterclass. My name is David Stockdale. I'll be your host on this excursion into the dark unknown. Now, as a special treat to kick off 2022, I'll be releasing a new version of my very first video, Decoding This House Has People in It. It would be an understatement to say that the original video is flawed. You have to keep in mind that I had never really edited a video prior to working on this behemoth. I really just didn't know what I was doing. It was an experiment. And I've been toying with this idea for a while, and I just finally decided to clean this baby up. This House Has People in It was such an interesting project, and frankly, I think you folks deserve a better presentation of my analysis. So I've done away with some of the more amateurish elements of the original video, and I've attempted to improve the general quality. I've also attempted to clean up the audio as best I could. Let's just say my knowledge of mixing in 2016 was subpar. I've also employed state-of-the-art technology to enhance the original material with computer-generated imagery. There was a limit to the magic I was able to pull off, but I do feel as though the end result is significantly better than the original video. I've also cut some material that I feel is either superfluous or not relevant to the overall analysis. Let's just say I wasn't all that experienced at editing myself in 2016. But I did actually add one line that was initially cut from the original script. True Masterclass heads will be able to spot the difference. Anyway, I'm keeping the original video up for the sake of posterity, but I'm hoping that anyone new to the channel will be directed towards this version because it's just going to be a more pleasant viewing experience. Now, with that preamble out of the way, I just wanted to wish everyone a Happy New Year. If you enjoy my videos and would like to support me on a monthly basis, you can go to patreon.com/NightmareMasterclass. Without further ado, let's proceed to Decoding This House Has People in It, Remastered. This House Has People in It is a short video presented on Adult Swim's infomercial blog. It was created by comedians Alan Resnick, Dina Kelberman, Robbie Radcliffe, and Ben O'Brien, along with other collaborators as part of the comedy and video collective Wham City Comedy. This short depicts an apparent supernatural event, i.e. a girl Madison phasing through the floor of her family's kitchen. This occurrence sets off a chain of events that causes Madison's family to panic. The video itself is a little under 12 minutes long, but additional hidden gems can be found on the AB Surveillance Solutions website. Do a little digging for yourself and you'll find that what we have here is a multimedia art project, and it's a behemoth. Including text files, images, audio, and video, there are at least 2 full hours of material to examine. In terms of narrative, we can best describe This House Has People in It as the story of a family that slowly begins to unravel for reasons that aren't quite clear to the viewer. Each of the characters, Tom, Madison, Anne, Jackson, Grandma, and the repairman, act in ways that indicate their grip on reality is loosening. Moreover, certain enigmatic figures lurk throughout the story, only creating more confusion as to what exactly is happening. First and foremost, I have to give credit where credit is due. Nick Nocturne of the Nightmine YouTube channel gave an outstanding analysis of this material shortly after it came out. If you haven't already watched this video, I strongly urge you to do so, link in the show notes.
Many of the connections I make in this video would not have been possible if not for his insight. I also have to give credit to everyone who participated in the subreddit Surveillance Solutions. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention the massive Google Doc created to track all information related to This House Has People in It. Over these past few months, many people have worked together to scrape through all of the material for any possible clue as to what's going on. There are a lot of compelling interpretations. Now, I don't profess to have all the answers, but I do think my interpretation of this work is unique, and I believe it answers some questions that have not yet been fully addressed. It is my opinion that the answers to This House Has People in It are contained within the material. There is a clear, if bizarre, explanation to all of the anomalies that occur throughout the story, though that explanation may not be in line with our own version of reality. After all, this work does contain many elements associated with alternate reality gaming. Is it a stretch to contend that the events of This House Has People in It occur within an alternate universe? A universe that perhaps operates a little differently than our own? Nick is spot on about perception being a major theme, and we'll discuss how that relates to my analysis later on. I believe that everything that occurs within the universe of This House Has People in It happens for a specific reason. Moreover, despite appearances, I believe there is a narrative consistency within the universe. A note on genre. I believe that This House Has People in It follows in the tradition of magical realism, a kind of fiction that portrays seemingly magical or unexplainable events in an otherwise mundane, ordinary setting. Sound familiar? Authors such as Franz Kafka, Jorge Luis Borges, and Gabriel Garcia Marquez have made this genre notable in a literary context, but filmmakers have dabbled in magical realism as well. For the purposes of illustration, Kafka's The Metamorphosis is an apt parallel. In The Metamorphosis, Kafka's protagonist, Gregor Samsa, finds himself inexplicably transformed into a bug. As you might expect, this is a very distressful event in Gregor's life, and yet his family and work colleagues view it mostly as an inconvenience. To the reader, Gregor's transformation is completely unexplainable, and indeed, it never is thoroughly explained in the novella. It's just something that happens, kind of like how Madison inexplicably phases through the floor in This House Has People in It. I wrote a paper on the Metamorphosis in college. In my paper, I argued that Gregor's transformation was due to his persisting alienation from family, work, and society at large. It was basically a Marxist take on the work, with Gregor representing the proletariat, the poor underclass being continually fucked over by the bourgeois, who, in modern-day terms, we might refer to as the 1%. It isn't exactly the most original argument. Many literary theorists have argued the book's meaning along similar lines, although their arguments were more nuanced and pointed than a college sophomore's. But there was a logic to my thesis. In the universe created by Kafka, the metamorphosis that Gregor undergoes is evidently possible. The real mystery is why it occurs. All that we, the readers, have to go on is what is presented to us. Kafka makes Gregor's alienation abundantly clear. He all but hits the reader over the head with Gregor's shitty, subpar life. In such a world, could the protagonist's feelings of alienation cause his so-called metamorphosis? Observance. The strange events that occur in This House Has People in It are apparently possible in the universe conjured by Resnick in Wham City. The real question is obvious. Why? We know the folks at AB Surveillance Solutions are observing the events that take place within the house. But really, I think we, the viewers, are AB Surveillance. Resnick and Wham City are challenging us to make sense of things. The family members are consistently referred to as subjects. Resnick is trying to give you an empirical view of them, at least to the extent that such a feat is possible. He's asking you to observe this situation from a dispassionate perspective, and people have done that. In fact, someone took the time to put all of the material in chronological order, complete with voiceovers for the text files. That is quite a feat, and it must have taken hours. If you want a more complete picture of the events that transpire in this universe, watch this in its entirety, and be patient. I have, and the picture that the creators paint is disturbing, at times humorous, and seemingly nonsensical. But in order to understand the work, I think you have to take what happens at face value, You have to view each of the family members as the subject of a study. I promise if you do this, the nature of the study will become clear. Memes. The consistent and sometimes vexing allusion to internet memes is something that calls attention to itself, and this house has people in it. The sculptor is a figure almost inherently meme-worthy, like Star Wars Kid or Chocolate Rain. Boomy is another primary example. He's clearly meant to be a play on Sonic the Hedgehog, a figure that has been abundant fodder for memes since the dawn of the internet. Apparently, Boomy is a sensation in the universe of This House Has People in It. More on him later. At this point, it would suffice to say that memes are literally running through this piece. Why? The internet is touted by many as a place where information is exchanged and shared freely, making the world a better place. In large part, this is true. It's abundantly obvious. But maybe Resnick is warning us. Maybe the message here is that misinformation can spread just as freely, and not just on the internet. The word meme can be defined as a concept, belief, or practice conceived as a unit of cultural information that may be passed from person to person, subject to influences in a way analogous to natural selection. So why am I showing you this? Well, I believe that the threads in This House Has People in It connect in such a way to suggest that there is not only a relation to the idea of memes, but also a message about the nature of unfounded, potentially harmful belief systems, systems that spread and evolve. The artist. It is no coincidence that Resnick makes a cameo as the sculptor. His sculpture is a parodic representation of This House Has People in It as a whole. It's a piece of art that is haphazardly crafted together from clay and random objects. Were one to stumble upon such a monstrosity in an alley, it wouldn't be unthinkable to assume the piece was mere garbage. Yet I should note that it's not very far off from what is critically heralded in the world of outsider art. Similarly, were you to randomly catch This House Has People in It on Adult Swim at 2 a.m., well, my bet is you'd probably be at a loss for words as to what exactly you had just seen. The sculptor is clearly deranged. He makes numerous contradictions about the nature of Lynx disease. He seems to be obsessed with a lost love named Sam. One might even compare him to Van Gogh, who notably cut off his own ear after a fit of dementia and later gave it to a prostitute. But the sculptor does spout a bit of wisdom here and there. At one point, he says,
"Sometimes when God closes a door, he opens a window. But sometimes he also closes that window. That's Lynx disease."
Here, the sculptor connects the idea of Lynx with the notion of being trapped inside a house. The door is closed, the window is closed, there's no way out. Moreover, he connects the concept of Lynx to religion itself. After all, God is the one closing the doors and windows. God is the one trapping you. Later, the sculptor addresses Sam and says,
"Maybe people make mistakes and they end up in a private prison that they don't want to be in for years, and they get Lynx disease."
Again, the sculptor draws the connection between Lynx disease and being trapped. Only this time he uses more extreme language. He connects the illness to the concept of imprisonment. But instead of placing blame solely on God, the sculptor chalks it up, at least in part, to his own mistakes. He was in a private prison of his own making. The sculptor makes an interesting analogy. He alludes to the basement of a house being the foundation, just like his cardboard serves as the foundation for his clay sculpture. We can possibly infer here that this is a reference to the basement in the family's home. Later, the sculptor carefully puts the sculpture on a piece of cardboard and continues using the analogy of the house, saying he's returning it to its home, its foundation. Let's talk about the sculpture itself. Now, you could say the sculpture is a piece of abstract art, subject to the perception of its viewer. You might discard it as a heap of garbage created by an insane person. You might think it's a breathtaking work of genius. This is all in a sense valid, but I believe the sculpture also serves as a commentary on the structure of the entire piece. It is a disordered amalgamation of a variety of materials. Toward the beginning of the Clayground episode, the sculptor peels off the top of his clay head. Later, he hits the top of the head with a hammer. He subliminally indicates what he is doing. He is destroying the viewer's mind. He's manipulating it like a piece of clay. And from the demented mind of the artist comes a physical manifestation of his own madness. Keep this in mind because it will become relevant to my analysis later on. Family matters. Let's take a look at the family. Tom and Anne are some seriously neurotic people, and based on screen time, it would seem that the children in this house are rather neglected, if not physically, then certainly emotionally. Take notice. How often do either of the parents actually interact with Jackson or Madison? If the tapes are any indication, it's a surprisingly small amount of time, and when they do, it's usually negative attention. Anne is continually harsh with her daughter Madison.
Madison, I don't want to embarrass you in front of the rest of the family, but your bathroom breaks are becoming very problematic. Are you checking your phone on the T? We have 2 new members of our household, and that means that we have to be more aware of how we share the space. Using your tea time to look at the internet is very unhelpful and also unsanitary. Remember that Link's disease spreads amongst the family like a fire.
Notice how controlling Anne is with her daughter in this clip. Hell, she's timing the poor girl's bathroom breaks. Is this a home or a prison?
Madison, I found cigarettes underneath the gazing globe in the backyard. I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt this one time and assume they are not yours. But if I ever find cigarettes in this house, I am going to come down on you like divine wind. I am serious. I will not have my daughter smoking like a delinquent. You need to get your priorities straight. There's too much going on right now for me to have to deal with this.
Of course, it's entirely normal for Anne to be concerned that her daughter is smoking cigarettes. But notice the callous nature of this exchange. First and foremost, it's done via email. I don't know about you, but it seems prudent to me to have this conversation in person. Secondly, Anne makes a situation about herself. She says, "There's too much going on right now for me to have to deal with this." That is cold. And if you think Jackson is getting off light, think again. Tom and Anne do spend time discussing Jackson's well-being, specifically vis-a-vis his potentially unhealthy fascination with Boomy. But based on what we know, we can surmise that Tom is really just using the situation as an excuse to discuss his own obsession with the blue trash-eating cat. In fact, Tom only really discusses Jackson when it's relevant to his own interest in Boomy. Meanwhile, we know from the emails that Jackson has no friends in this new neighborhood, and he doesn't even know who to invite to his birthday party. I do think that Tom realizes he has been neglecting his son, which is why he tries to make sure Jackson has a nice party. But as we know, that plan goes horribly wrong. In one clip, Tom and Anne have a discussion about Tom's recent visit to the eye doctor. He explains that the doctor found his right eye to be out of focus. When Anne asks if he needs glasses, Tom responds that his left eye has been compensating, and the doctor has surmised that it isn't yet time for glasses. Anne recognizes this for the bullshit it is, and presses him further. We then find out that Tom doesn't want glasses because he thinks they'll make him look old. Tom rejects the premise that he needs glasses for reasons primarily related to his own vanity. His outright rejection of Western medicine is meaningful here. It seems he literally has a blind spot when it comes to recognizing what's best for his well-being. This could also be an allusion to the fact that the family has a blind spot of their own. They cannot see that Link's disease is made up. They cannot see that it's a fiction, one filled with numerous contradictions. And really, would they want to know? If Link's isn't real, it would mean that the family has been acting completely insane for no good reason. It would mean that time and effort have been put into avoiding an imaginary danger. The sculptor notes that his clay is from a prison yard. In my opinion, this is an allusion to the fact that many felons are converted to some type of fundamentalist religion or ideology while they're in prison. People are susceptible to faith-based beliefs when they're in a bad place, whether physically, emotionally, or both. Based on what we know, we can surmise that the family isn't exactly in a great place emotionally. This makes them more susceptible to Link's disease. Their minds are like clay. Back to Tom and his glasses. He's concerned that glasses will make him look old. There is a dissonance between the family's general concern for their collective well-being and Tom's strange obsession with youth. In this clip, Tom temporarily becomes helpless on the floor. It kind of seems like he wants to be a baby. Earlier we see Tom secretly trying on his son's clothes. Aside from being out of this world creepy, this action also points towards the idea that Tom yearns for a simpler time in his life. A time without the various pressures of adulthood, but the manner in which he acts out this yearning is utterly bizarre. Tom is aware of this to some degree, which is why he generally keeps his activities a secret. Instead of talking about his anxieties in a direct way, he continually represses them, and he's not the only one. When Madison begins sinking into the ground, Anne tells Jackson to keep all of the guests outside. She wants to keep this situation in the family. She doesn't want outsiders to know about their little problem. I think this repressive impulse is emotionally damaging, not only to Madison, but to the entire family. Based on certain email messages, we know that this is a blended family. Jackson is Tom's son, and Madison is Anne's daughter. The baby is Tom and Anne's first child together. Like the sculpture, Tom and Anne have patched together their family from unrelated parts of others. What happened to Jackson's mother? What happened to Madison's father? Death? Divorce? We don't know. It never comes up. They kind of remind me of another certain TV family, one that is perhaps the most notable blended family in TV history. There is one important parallel that I want to discuss when it comes to the Brady Bunch. Do we ever really find out what happened to Marcia, Cindy, and Jan's father in the Brady Bunch? Do we ever know the fate of Greg, Peter, and Bobby's mother? One indication is a scene from the pilot episode. Mike Brady notices that his son, Bobby, has put his mother's photo away. Mike asks his son why, and Bobby replies that he thought Carol might not like it. Mike implores Bobby to put the photo back and lets him know that he should never forget his mother. The distinction here is that the Brady Bunch was idyllic and relatively healthy from an emotional standpoint. Hey, who's that woman on the photo above Jackson's bed? It's not Anne. It's not Madison. I think it's his mother. But it seems she has blacked out eyes. She's dead. And take note, directly after the central video, subject 3, prone in kitchen floor, Tom is trying on Jackson's clothes, and guess what? The picture isn't there. Did Jackson put it away, just like Bobby tried to in the Brady Bunch? Perhaps Jackson believes that the memory of his mother is causing problems in the house. And just maybe he's correct about that. Here's an open question. Where's the R? The birthday sign in the living room is missing an R. When Nick posted his video, Alan Resnick himself commented. He said, "Find the R." There are a few theories about this. Note in certain email exchanges Madison's reluctance to call Tom Dad, despite the fact that this is clearly how he'd prefer to be addressed. She already has a father, and it's not Tom. Maybe Anne's ex-husband cheated on her. Or maybe he left her. We don't really know. But here's a question. What's going on with all these dog figurines? There are dog figurines pretty much everywhere in the house, mainly in the living room. Whatever the nature of their split, perhaps the dog imagery is Anne's way of reminding herself that men are dogs. I've always found this to be a strange saying, considering dogs are usually quite loyal. I think the creators are exploring this dichotomy in an interesting way. Resnick used some compelling imagery in the additional material from his previous infomercial feature, unedited footage of a bear. There was a man stuck in the floor. One compelling interpretation of this is that the man is the protagonist's ex-husband, and the imagery represents his looming presence in the protagonist's psyche. Well, and this house has people in it. We know there's a hand coming out of the wall in the basement. We know that 2 men appear mysteriously behind some trees in the backyard. It happens so quickly that you have to go frame by frame to even notice. Who are these men? What is that hand? I think it's a representation of Anne's ex-husband. In one phone conversation, Tom alludes to a picture frame that he needs to fix. Remember when Tom said,
"Look, if I can't see something on a screen, I'll just zoom in."
Take a look at this picture in the family's living room. What is that? Is it an R? What is it covering up? I think it's a picture of Madison's dad. I think R stands for repression, and Tom is trying to get Madison to repress the memory of her real father. He broke that picture frame so he could slip an R in there to block the picture of her real father. Tom wants to be the only father figure in her life. This is by no means definitive, and I'll discuss another theory about the R later on. But you have to note that there is a consistent tension in the house, a psychic pain that ruminates throughout the whole piece. They never talk about it, but it's there. They are all demonstrably repressed. And here's the thing about repressed emotions. They tend to come to the surface one way or another. And in this house, they come to the surface in a very special way. Charlatans and reality distortion. It is said that tech wizard Steve Jobs had the distinct ability to distort reality. During his time at Apple, Jobs would often ask the seemingly impossible of his staff, committing them to goals that simply weren't realistic in their eyes. He was often lauded for this by corporate leaders, but of course, we now know that he wasn't exactly a saint. Ironically, Jobs' brand of reality distortion eventually got the best of him. When Jobs was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, he opted for an alternative medicine-based natural solution in lieu of a treatment recommended by his doctors. He tried herbal remedies, acupuncture, and he consumed an all-vegan diet. This was not successful. Barry R. Castleth, the chief of Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center Integrative Medicine Department, said, Jobs' faith in alternative medicine likely cost him his life. He had the only kind of pancreatic cancer that is treatable and curable. He essentially committed suicide. Why am I talking about Steve Jobs? Well, there is a sharp criticism of alternative medicine embedded within the subtext of This House Has People in It. And there is a kind of reality distortion field in This House Has People in It, the scope of which we cannot know. Does it encompass the house, the whole neighborhood, the entire world? It seems that characters in the house are confused about the distinction between fiction and reality, as evidenced by Anne's strange overreaction when a character in one of her books dies.
A character in my book died.
Which one?
Arthur.
Perhaps Anne has that kind of reaction for a legitimate reason. Perhaps within the confines of the house, there is no difference between fiction and reality. Maybe the entire idea of fiction is just not a thing in this version of reality. Maybe she perceives everything she's reading as completely real. Tom doesn't find this odd. In fact, he sympathizes with her. In this universe, is it also possible that strongly held beliefs can manifest into physical anomalies? Is it possible that thoughts are just as real to these characters as physical entities? I think this is the key to understanding This House Has People in It. Yes, perception is absolutely a central theme in the work. The piece is entirely open to interpretation. To a degree, any work is. But perception is also a central theme because this is a universe in which the subject's various perceptions have the ability to influence and indeed manipulate their very reality. That's a horrifying concept. Again, we return to Boomy. It is strongly implied that Tom has a rather unhealthy fixation on Boomy. As evidenced by a number of videos, Tom sings Boomy's theme song on multiple occasions.
Run so fast, it looks so sweet, the sweetest, funniest cat I ever did meet. He's booming around, he's Boomy, the bluest in town.
He draws pictures of the character while dressed like Jackson. Tom may be secretly dressing up like the character and running around the neighborhood like a maniac. And yet, in the central video, Subject 3, Prone in Kitchen Floor, we see a blue figure chase a deer away in the window. We know this cannot be Tom. He's preoccupied in the kitchen. So how can we explain what appears in the window? If strong beliefs have the ability to influence reality, perhaps Tom's obsession with Boomy creates a physical manifestation of the popular character. And here's how you might be able to make a distinction between Tom dressing up like Boomy and Boomy himself. When the entity is moving so fast you can barely see it, that's the real Boomy. That's the manifestation. Note that when this is the case, Tom's whereabouts are always accounted for. See, there's a logic to all of this. Link's disease itself has a physical manifestation, the nightmarish pink figure that haunts the family. We shall refer to this figure as the family friend for the remainder of this analysis, since that's how the entity is credited. Why does the family friend drape itself in Jackson's bedsheets? Why does it rise from a cluttered garage? We know the garage is filled with Tom and Jackson's belongings, as evidenced from text files in which Anne asked Tom to start thinking about what they need to get rid of. The family friend is part of that. It is something that belongs to Tom and Jackson. It's baggage that came with them when they moved. It is a repressed manifestation of Tom's deceased wife, Jackson's deceased mother. It lurks over Tom in his dreams. It sits in the corner while the family marvels at their new Christmas tree. The family friend is reminiscent of the horrifying, freakish vagrant in the film Mulholland Drive, directed by David Lynch. Some have argued that the vagrant in Mulholland Drive is a literal manifestation of the protagonist's broken dreams of Hollywood stardom. Similarly, in This House Has People in It, the family friend is the personification of Link's disease, but moreover, it is the embodiment of the family's collective anxieties. The corruption of youth. Tom is compelled to eat garbage by a cartoon character. Anyone who was a fan of the Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon knows of his love for chili dogs. This is a pretty conspicuous parallel if you ask me. Think about it. Hot dogs are basically trash in meat form. They are composed of the remnant parts left over from the pig or the cow after the substantial parts have been used. How many cartoon icons smile at us on the cover of cereal boxes, compelling us to eat poorly? How many of these icons have compelled us to pick up other dangerous habits? Anyone remember Joe Camel? This charming fellow used to be on the cover of every box of Camel cigarettes. The Journal of the American Medical Association published a study alleging that the Joe Camel campaign was targeting children. The study showed that by age 6, nearly as many kids were able to associate Joe Camel with cigarettes as there were kids who associated the Disney Channel logo with Mickey Mouse. A lawsuit was brought against Camel, and they eventually ended the decades-long Joe Camel campaign. Boomy seems to represent the corruption of innocence through commercialism. This is why he chases away a baby deer. In a way, Boomy and the family friend are two sides of the same coin. They both signify the corruption of innocence and youth. Boomy is corruption due to the various inescapable forces of commercialism, and the family friend is corruption due to traumatizing, tragic events that occur in the family's respective lives, events that cause them to cling to irrational beliefs for comfort. Childhood is a time when we are all exposed to many ideas from many different sources, some good and some not so good. And as children, we simply cannot tell the difference between well-founded beliefs and ones that are clearly bullshit. Once a child has been indoctrinated into a given belief or ideology, it can be difficult and extremely painful for them to find out that their beliefs are not so concrete. Some children are able to eventually escape their parents' dogmatic belief systems, and unfortunately some succumb to it and go on to have children of their own. The cycle continues. In the main video, we see the baby crawl away as Tom and Anne attempt to save Madison. Ironically, this could be the best possible fate for the baby. Maybe the poor thing will find a sane family. But alas, we can note the baby's presence later in the storyline. God bless America. The piece seems to be, at least in part, a criticism of American culture. There's a close-up in the main video of Tom holding what appears to be a Bible, and Jackson holding a football. They're an all-American family with Christian values. Ask yourself, viewers, what's crazier than believing in a disease that doesn't objectively exist? How about encouraging your kids to participate in a sport that has been known to cause severe brain damage? How about a religion based around a man sent on a suicide mission to die for the sins of humanity? This is starting to hit a little too close to home, isn't it? When Jackson's laying in bed and Grandma says, "You're a dead body," not only is it creepy, it's symbolically meaningful. Note the blank expression on Jackson's face. Note the manner in which he is bracing himself while laying on his race car bed, all while this woman's picture looms over him. I think Jackson's mother died in a car accident, and he doesn't yet have the emotional maturity to process this information. Why does he seem to be in a position reminiscent to that of Jesus on the cross? I think it's symbolic. Jackson is performing some kind of ritual in order to feel closer to his dead mother. It's really quite tragic. Since we're on the topic of mothers and Jesus, it might help to put this into context with Christian mythology. Listen to this translated bit of the Sabbat Mater, a Catholic hymn about Mary's anguish watching her son Jesus die on the cross. At the cross her station keeping, stood the mournful mother weeping, close to Jesus to the last. Jackson's faith is likely the only reference point he has for someone who has died and come back to life. His faith is also a significant reference in terms of Mary's relationship to Jesus. Not only is Jackson relying on his own faith to comfort him, he's also projecting some kind of religious significance to his relationship with his own mother. Religion provides hope for him, but ultimately it's a false hope. Let's circle back to this matter of the R. Could the R stand for run for office? There's a note on the fridge that says, run for office. Now let's ask ourselves, which character is most likely to have political ambitions?
Salute the flag! Salute the flag! Salute the flag! We are bloody, but we're punching and kicking. We're a family. No matter what anyone says, love each other through grinding teeth. That's our strength. That's our bond. Feel my hands are on fire.
The notion of this man garnering any sort of political influence is truly horrifying. While it seems unlikely that Tom could ever convince anyone to vote for him, is it really that unthinkable considering our current situation in the United States?
The poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember. He's going like, I don't remember. Oh, maybe that's what I said. This was 14 years ago. They didn't do a retraction.
Now, listen to this discussion about China.
They're planning a high-speed rail between LA and Las Vegas. The Chinese are. How about that?
We're planning it, not the Chinese.
No, they're out. It's a state-run Chinese company.
It's making our railroad.
Well, I mean, you don't see.
Guess they make everything else.
We also have an email exchange between Tom and Madison in which China is again referenced. Now, what's going on in this clip? Based on information from the Links pamphlet, we can assume that Tom is playing the record in order to treat the disease. But why does it play war sounds? And moreover, why do war sounds seem to comfort Tom? Why does Tom sing a song about a flag? What are the references to China and the economy about?
China is sucking us dry. They're taking our money, they're taking our jobs, they're doing so much. We have rebuilt China with what they've taken out.
They, by the way, Bill, just in case you don't know it, they tax our goods going into China. It's a totally unfair deal.
We can't continue to allow China to rape our country, and that's what they're doing.
Now, take a look at this other note on the fridge. What does all of this mean? I think patriotism is just another meme in this house, and it's one that specifically pervades Tom's psychological makeup. He has a fascination with the economic competition between China and the US. He has political ambitions of his own, and he seems to place a certain value on the military-industrial complex and the concept of war in general. The illness is real. Because strongly held beliefs manifest into physical anomalies, it follows that the belief in an illness such as the imaginary lynx might manifest into a real physical illness as well. This is perhaps why Anne's doctor is so adamant that her test results are negative.
Anne, the lab results are back in, and I'm happy to inform you that the samples you brought to the office last week have been confirmed lynx-free. I hope this news finds you well and that you can finally feel resolved. Lynx has become a big issue in our community, and it's going to be up to people like you to help stop it from becoming a bigger one. That said, this is the 4th set of samples you've brought to our attention, and I'm concerned that you are taking these matters perhaps too seriously. Remember that we have other patients to whom we have to show the same amount of care and attention as we have to you and your family. Try and take these lab results to heart. If you continue on bringing me and my staff these samples, I may have to ask you to find another physician.
The doctor doesn't want Anne to believe that she has Lynx disease. If Anne believes that she has it, she will consequently be afflicted by it. It's a bit of a mindfuck, isn't it? There are some real-world parallels here. Morgellons disease is a self-diagnosed skin condition that is actually a form of delusional disorder. People suffering from such a delusion claim that their skin is infested with material such as sand, hair, or a thread-like substance. Moreover, they suffer from hallucinations of fibers coming out of their skin. Most doctors do not recommend humoring the patient by treating their skin condition with a common treatment, such as antibiotics, since this does not treat the underlying delusional disorder. But in the case of Lynx, humoring the patient might be the best course of action. Telling the patient that their test results are negative might convince them that they do not actually have the disease. This is the best possible scenario for the patient. Paradoxically, Lynx is real in this universe, or rather, it's made real as the idea spreads and catches hold on the public. In this universe, Lynx is kind of like Tinkerbell. In Peter Pan, the fairy Tinkerbell is revived from near death by the belief of the audience. Similarly, Lynx is only real when people believe in it. This is why Madison falls through the floor. The family's belief in Lynx persists and escalates throughout the story. This communal belief creates a physical phenomena, and eventually, it creates real physical symptoms associated with the disease. If we follow the metaphor of the mind being a piece of clay, many of the sculptor's statements begin to make a startling amount of sense. The mind can cause Lynx, and it can cure Lynx. It is a virus of the mind that can only be combated by using the mind against it. Because the disease does not adhere to logical mechanisms, literally anything that occurs in the videos may or may not be a symptom of Lynx. The process of analyzing such a work is inherently rife with irreconcilable paradoxes. This is not a bug, it's a feature. It's part of the fun. The viewer, in the process of discerning whether or not Lynx is real, catches the disease by virtue of going down the rabbit hole. Why is perfect pitch a symptom of Lynx disease? Well, a lot of great music comes from a place of deeply held, albeit patently absurd beliefs. Now, let's take for instance, Prince. It shouldn't be controversial to say that he was a musical genius. Listen to When Doves Cry and tell me that it doesn't come from a place of unparalleled talent. And Prince very likely had perfect pitch. But he was also a hardcore Jehovah's Witness. Now, here's an interesting fact about Jehovah's Witnesses. They generally don't accept blood transfusions, even in life-threatening circumstances. It's exactly this sort of silly, potentially harmful behavior that can spread like a meme under certain conditions. And what's going on with the repairman? I think his story is remarkably similar to Steve Drain's, the guy who went to the Westboro Baptist Church intending to do a documentary. Kind of like how AB Surveillance is documenting the home. Well, this guy actually became indoctrinated by the church. And similarly, the repairman gets Lynx disease, just like the rest of the family. I think this is why we see him getting beat up by a couple of men. Those men also work for AB Surveillance. They're punishing him for not remaining properly objective. And at this point, it feels pertinent to ask, are we being objective? In order to make sense of this piece, it is necessary to continually question your own ability to draw logical conclusions from seemingly random events. Is such a feat possible? Can we make sense of this? Or are we just... Wait, was that a 60-frame crossfade? No. 60-frame crossfades cause Lynx disease. Do a jump cut. There, that's better. It all comes back to the house. Without a good foundation, the entire structure will collapse. Well, in terms of logic and coherence, none of the characters in This House Has People in It have a good foundation. That is made abundantly clear. Notice how the family friend rises from an extremely cluttered room. The disarray is intentional. It represents the family's collective frame of mind. Their thoughts are not orderly. They are confused and delusional. They are not thinking clearly and have given credence to their own delusions. They cannot tell the difference between reality and fiction. This gives rise to the mind virus that is Lynx disease. The stronger their fear in Lynx grows, the more powerful the family friend becomes. It is an unfortunate consequence of the family's persisting dread. In the seemingly arbitrary complexity of This House Has People in It, there is a message, and it's a rather straightforward, unambiguous message at that. This House Has People in It has a point. Ultimately, I believe that it is about the dangers of buying into ideologies based on logical fallacies and pseudoscience, and moreover, the consequences of having beliefs not rooted in evidence or rational thought. I don't think the creators are making any kind of objective claim about the existence of God. It's more about endorsing a healthy sense of skepticism. It's about trusting in logic and concrete evidence, even in the face of various societal pressures. After all, beliefs have consequences. Beliefs have an impact on the world, even if they're not rooted in truth. Resnick and Wham City are laying bare for you, the audience, the dire consequences of having a belief system that is distinctly lacking in a good foundation. They are showing you what a world not rooted in reality looks like. Is that a world you want to live in? Well, surprise, you already are. This is real life, unfortunately. This is the scene at Jonestown, after over 900 members of the People's Temple perished, many having committed suicide. They were compelled to drink Kool-Aid laced with cyanide by their mentally unstable leader, Jim Jones. As a consequence, the phrase drinking the Kool-Aid has come to signify the blind acceptance of a potentially harmful belief. This is a potential result of a belief system not subject to examination or scrutiny. The title, This House Has People in It, is significant because in this dark, absurdist piece, misguided people and their beliefs are the real source of horror. Not demons, not ghosts, not monsters. People. People with a myriad of issues, all working to avoid their real problems, instead opting to believe in this Lynx disease. Perhaps for them, it's easier to imagine an external cause for their pain than it is to deal with their actual problems. But the real tragedy in all of this is, it's not the family's fault. None of this is their fault. They are subject to manipulation from outside forces that shape their reality in horrifying ways. Look around you. Pay attention. What external forces are shaping your perception? This House Has People in It is a multi-layered, thoughtful piece of art that demands your attention. And it is everything that great art should be. It's subversive, it's nonlinear, and it's nuanced. This piece is asking you to question the various societal forces that shape your perception. The family is a parodic, exaggerated version of the average American family. They are manipulated by charlatans on the television. They have trouble distinguishing fiction from reality, and they all have emotional baggage they are not dealing with. Whether it's patriotism, or some form of religion, or pseudoscience, all of the forces in this house encourage quick, easy solutions instead of critical thinking. The piece is about how various aspects of society shape people's perceptions and sometimes drive them to behave in an insane manner. That wraps it up for this episode of Nightmare Masterclass. In our next spooky lecture, we attempt to solve the mystery of what happened to Brendan Fraser's acting career, and this one gets dark. Join us next time, and thank you for watching.